All right, today we're going to talk about and learn about solving equations using the quadratic formula. Solving equations using the quadratic formula does the same thing as solving by factoring, but this time we can solve and get solutions to problems that are not able to be factored. Okay? In order to use our quadratic formula, we have to recall those two smaller formulas we've learned in the prior lessons, the formula for axis of symmetry and then the discriminant. You notice you have your formula here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's written right here. You can see all of that. Okay? Here's an example problem. Solve x squared minus 6x plus 4 equals 0 by the quadratic formula. The first thing you need to do is you have to make sure that it's in standard form. To do that, you can check your standard form or you can just go ahead and label your A, B, and C. Okay, so we have our A is our option 1, our B, and then our C. Right? And then you need to plug into your equation. So we have x equals negative, your b value is negative 6, so make sure it's in parentheses, plus or minus the square root of your negative 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and your c, which is 4. All of that is over your 2 times your a, which is 1. Okay? Now that you have that plugged in, you can start simplifying. When we start simplifying, we want to simplify our discriminant part first. Remember, your discriminant is the part that is under your square root. So that's this part. For this problem, when you solve that, you will get a discriminant of 20. Think back to what we learned yesterday with our discriminant. A positive discriminant tells us that we will have two solutions, two answers. So when I take and put this in the calculator, I should come out with two answers. All right, the next thing that I want to do and need to do is simplify what I have. So x equals negative negative makes that a positive 6 plus or minus the square root of 20, all of it over 2 times 1 is 2. All right, now we have to deal with this plus and minus sign here in the middle. Your calculator does not have a plus minus button. It has a plus sign and then it has a minus sign. Okay? So, in order to deal with that, we have to split our problem into two pieces. So we have x equals 6 plus the square root of 20 over 2. And then we have 6 minus the square root of 20 all over 2. This is where we have to use our calculator. If your calculator has a fraction button, the n over d button, then you can go ahead and push that and just type in your top and then your bottom. If your calculator does not have your n over d button, a fraction button, you have to use a lot of parentheses. To type that in, I'm going to show you how to type it in over here. You will have to put a parentheses, 6 plus square root, and then with that square root you'll have a parentheses, 20, close that parentheses, you have a second parentheses, you have to close again, and then you will divide by your bottom, which here is 2. Okay? That's to get this positive one. Then you'll go back and change the positive to a negative and get the second answer. So my two solutions that I get for this problem are x equals 5.24 and 0.76. You've got to round to 2 decimal places. Okay? So this means that our quadratic crosses our x-axis at 5.24 and 0.76. Okay? That's the first problem, the first example. All right, the next one we're going to look at is number 1 on our notes page. Okay. Again, make sure that this is in standard form. You have your A value, which is 1, your B, which is 10, and your C, which is -2. Go ahead and plug this in to your equation. I'm going to write the equation. X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of it over 2a. All right, let's fill it in. X equals negative, my b value is 10, plus or minus the square root of 10 squared minus 4 times my a, which is 1, and my c, which is -2. All of that is over 2 times 1. Okay, it's filled in. After we fill it in, we need to look for our discriminant and solve for our discriminant. Our discriminant in this problem is 108. 108. Again, it is positive, so that tells us that we will cross our x-axis 2 times, have 2 solutions. Okay? So let's simplify. X equals -10, stays -10, plus or minus the square root of 108 all over 2. Now we're going to split our problem apart. X equals -10 plus the square root of 108 all over 2, or -10 minus the square root of 108 all over 2. Now that I have solved these, again, put them in your calculator. Just a little reminder, if you don't have a fraction button, you need a parentheses here, but you also need a parentheses. There will be a parentheses here, so 2 sets of parentheses, okay? When you solve them, you get an answer of x equals 0.20 and -10.20. And of course, we can put them in curly brackets, but we don't have to. We can leave them the way they are. All right, the next problem we're going to look at is number 5. Is this problem in standard form? Well, yes, it is. We have our understood A, we have our B, and we have our C. That formula, x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of it over 2a. Okay, let's fill it in. So we have x equals negative, b is 6, plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4. My a is 1 and my c is 10. All of it's over 2 times a. What part did we say we solved first? The discriminant. Remember, that's the part under the square root, not counting the square root, just under the square root. And when I solve that, this time I get a discriminant of -4. Think back to the last lesson. Our discriminant of -4 tells us that we will have no real solutions. So let's simplify. So x equals -6 plus or minus the square root of -4 all over 2 times 1 is 2. Since I have no real solutions, I cannot solve this any farther. So I'm just going to write my answer of no real roots. And that would be my answer. Make sure you simplify and keep it all together, then I can't solve it anymore, so I am done. Is this in standard form? Well, no, it's not equal to 0. So to get it in standard form, we need to subtract 12x on both sides minus 12x. On the left side, there's not an x value to combine it with, so we will have 4x squared minus 12x plus 9, and that equals 0. Now am I in standard form? Well, yeah, I'm in standard form now. So my a value will be 4, my b value will be negative 12, and my c value will be 9. Make sure you keep it in this standard form when you move that term. Okay? Let's put it into the equation. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Right? Let's fill it in. X equals negative. My b is negative, so negative 12. Make sure you put that in parentheses. Plus or minus the square root of negative 12 squared minus 4. My a value is 4. And my c value is 9. Make sure you use parentheses. All of this is over 2 times a, which is 4. What part did we say we solved first? Oh yes, the discriminant part. Our discriminant part is under the square root. So when I solve under the square root on this one, I get a discriminant of 0. What did the discriminant of 0 tell us? The discriminant of 0 told us that we will have one solution. So let's keep simplifying. So x equals negative negative, on that 12, negative positive 12, plus or minus the square root of 0 all over 2 times 4 is 8. Well, we know the square root of 0 is 0, so I don't need that part. So I get x equals 12 over 8, which reduces to x equals 1.5. Okay. So I have my one solution of 1.5. Alright, so let's look at number 9. Number 9 is also not in standard form, so let's get it in standard form. To do that, we need to make our x squared positive. Okay, so add x squared on both sides. When I add x squared on both sides, I get x squared plus 2x equals 7. I'm still not in standard form because this equals 7, so subtract 7. So now I have x squared plus 2x minus 7, and that equals 0. Label my a, b, and c. Understood a, my b, and my c. And we need to plug it into my equation. The equation we said is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. All of this is over 2a. Alright, let's plug it in. So, x equals negative, my b is 2, plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 7. All of this is over 2 times 1. Don't forget your sets of parentheses. Simplify my discriminant first. When I simplify that discriminant, I get a discriminant of 32. We know that's positive, so that means I'm going to have 2 real roots. Keep simplifying. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 32 over 2. Okay? Because we have a plus and a minus sign, that means I need to write this out twice. So I have x equals negative 2 plus the square root of 32 over 2, or negative 2 minus the square root of 32 over 2. Now you'll plug it into your calculator. And when you plug it in your calculator, if you have that fraction button, just go ahead and hit the fraction button. If you don't, remember you need 2 sets of parentheses like this. Right? And then when you solve them, you get an answer of x equals 1.83 and negative 3.83. And those are your roots. And your zeros, where you're going to cross the x-axis. I hope this lesson has helped you. If you have questions, please see your algebra teacher.